a board member of Lincoln Ride to Life, co-sponsor of today's rally. Speaking about St. Thomas More and the role of the conscience, please welcome Mary Quintero.
Thank you for coming on this beautiful day in this wonderful nation of ours, the United States of America. A nation with the broadest freedoms bestowed on all the earth. It is what makes our nation truly great and why we will not, why we cannot stand idly by as we watch this gathering storm burst upon us and our children. Much is at stake. We are faced with a situation that makes it hard to exaggerate the threat. At the core of our freedom is our individual conscience. We know that to ask someone to go against their conscience is wrong, but to coerce or force someone to do so, especially under the authority of government, is unthinkable. And yet that is indeed what we face right here, right now, the unthinkable. We speak about conscience, and we may sometimes take it for granted. So it's worthwhile to take this opportunity to look at it, where it comes from, how it is that each individual has a conscience. Listen, please, to these beautiful words from the Catholic Catechism, which describes so well what each human being is so fortunate to possess. The conscience is the voice in you, ever calling you to do what is good and avoid what is evil. For man has in his heart a law inscribed by God. A man's conscience is his core and his sanctuary. There he is alone with God. And our good God throughout history has graced us with heroic individuals whose examples give us strength and courage. Hundreds of years later, we still benefit from one good man's insistence to follow his conscience. And that brings us to Sir Thomas More. We Catholics recognize him as Saint Thomas More. He was a brilliant attorney during the reign of King Henry VIII in the 1500s. He was a faithful husband and father. His keen intellect and his famous wit were obvious to everyone who knew him. He was a man of strong faith, strong conviction, with a deep love and respect for the law, a deep love for his country, and he was the trusted servant of the king, eventually appointed Chancellor of all England. However, when the king declared himself supreme head of Christians throughout his realm, including a demand that each sign an oath, good Sir Thomas could not do so, because he understood well that if he did, he would violate his own conscience, that voice in him that called him to do good and avoid evil. Many of you are aware of the excellent movie of his plight called A Man for All Seasons, made in 1966. It is a film well worth seeing. A Man for All Seasons is a movie our family has long considered one of our favorites. We have often quoted its lines to one another. One outstanding exchange occurs between St. Thomas and his good friend, the Duke of Norfolk. The Duke is understandably worried at what will happen to Sir Thomas if he won't comply with the king's order to sign the oath. He says to Sir Thomas, "Oh, confound this, Thomas. Why can't you do as I did and come with us for fellowship?" And St. Thomas, in his good wit, said, "And when we die, and you are sent to heaven for following your conscience, and I am sent to hell for not following mine, will you come with me for fellowship?" Well, Sir Thomas knew what following his conscience meant on a practical level. He had no choice but to resign his high office. He was reduced along with his family to near poverty, and this went on for many months until, after repeated attempts to coerce him to sign the oath, he was finally arrested and taken to the London Tower. While there, he watched as other men were executed for the very same reason. The good and holy Cardinal St. John Fisher met his death for the same cause of honoring God by refusing to reject his own conscience. Even in the face of all of this, Sir Thomas persevered and stayed the course. He was finally executed after being convicted of treason in a mock trial with false testimony. Before he was beheaded, he spoke briefly these words: "I die the king's good servant, but God's first. This bears repeating. I died the King's good servant, but God's first. So here we are today, following in his footsteps and the footsteps of each person that sacrificed for freedom, including our own founding fathers, who made tremendous sacrifices, and all those that have come after them. Now it comes to this. It's our turn to sacrifice. Listen, if you will, to this one final word of wisdom of our good St. Thomas More, because it rings as true today. He said, when statesmen forsake their own conscience for the sake of public office, they lead their country on a short route to chaos. Is it not true that this is indeed the route upon which we are set today, the short route to chaos? Today we are each faced with a mandate, not from a king, but from an administration that has lost sight of what freedom of conscience means to each and every individual American. This fight is not of our making, but we will not shrink from it. Let's think about this. God knew when he brought each and every one of us into existence, when he chose the era in history that we would be on this earth, he knew that at this place, at this time, we would face this challenge to choose between serving God and serving man. Realizing that inspires me to arise to this occasion. Let us approach this struggle without apology, but also with humble prayer for divine assistance as we continue to offer our thanks to God for the goodness he has bestowed on our great land. Let us say onward for love of God and love of country.